right. Okay. Well, Marcie, thank you for joining us for this interview. And as I mentioned, we've got a number of questions here that I would love to get your insights on. And let's just jump right in. So, Marcie, first question. What do you consider to be the three key scientific or engineering breakthroughs in haptics over the past couple of decades that we've been running this conference?
Um, so when I think about advances in the field, I tend to sort of categorize them in a way to how we organize our conference, right? Applications, technologies, and human psychophysics. So I'll do my best to try and identify maybe one in each category. Um, the uh, I think on the human haptics side, I think this real um, deep investigation into how we perceive systems that are artificially rendered and the dual role, maybe not even dual, right? The multifaceted role of the hardware itself that we're using to convey haptic
Mhm.
feedback, the algorithms that we use to generate that haptic and touch feedback, and then the interplay with sort of our own ways of measuring human perception. I think the maybe I can't put my finger on like one finding, but the knowledge that we really need to sort of investigate these things holistically and have an understanding that each of the technologies, the hardware and the rendering affects human perception, and that we can't really understand human perception unless we're doing it in the loop with these systems. Um,
Yeah.
maybe on the um, more on the scientific or maybe more on the engineering breakthroughs. What's been really exciting to me is how advances in materials and actuation are influencing the packaging that we can provide haptic feedback in, right? So this real shift from we're going to use, DC motors in grounded desktop devices to a shift to things that are more portable and wearable, which has been deeply intertwined with advances in actuation technologies and understanding of new materials and actuation methodologies.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really nice. Great. So that was technologies and human haptics applications.
Applications. Um, This is the one I don't want to be on the record for. I think we're still searching, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think that we have identified applications where touch is very important, right? As we move away from keyboards and everything is screen-based, we've really lost this sense of engagement with the environments in which we're interacting, and so we're trying to add touch back into, screens and surfaces. I think we still face the challenge of showing the value add
Yeah.
of the engineering complexity that brings to these systems. But maybe in one place where I would say we really have seen some interesting advances is in like assistive devices and from like rehabilitation and prosthetics, where
Mhm.
this notion of I can modulate the torque applied to a limb, or I can provide this alternative sensory feedback, and we can really see how that can restore function or replace lost capabilities in individuals who've had some kinds of injuries.
All right. That's nice. And maybe that's a nice segue into this next question, which is which products do you feel haptics had the most significant impact on?
So I want to turn this one around, and
Sure.
I want to say, like, I think it's difficult for me to say this product is revolutionized because of haptics, but I want to say that the inclusion of haptics in consumer products has really helped us advance the field, right?
Mm,
So, if I think about, my first haptic symposium presentations, or we were always, if it wasn't the haptics audience, we always had to define what is haptics, right? And now it is ubiquitous, right? We've got haptics in our phones, we've got haptics in our watches, we've got this in popular press and media. And so there's a real understanding of this sensation, and there's a sense, even if we can't quantify it, of that this adds value. And so I think that has had a real impact on our field because it's attracting a more interdisciplinary set of researchers to our community. So I'm not not going to directly answer the question about
Oh, that's a great
I think
answer.
there's made a difference in this product, but I do think the widespread implementation of haptic feedback, however simplistic, the vibration feedback in our phones and watches is, I think that's done a lot for the field in general.
Yeah, yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's definitely brought attention and let the public understand there is this thing out there called haptics. So, a quick anecdote: I recently bought a one of those electric lift desks for use at home, and it has a little tiny panel with just up and down buttons and some memory buttons, and I press it, and it's got haptics, and it was a moment of delight that the technology, as simple as it may be, had made it into a product like that. So that was nice. Well, let me get back to my questions for you. And I guess the next question is about the future. And a lot of these are really about the future. What excites you most about the future of the field of haptics?
Um, Maybe I alluded to it earlier, but for me, it's the promise of novel materials and actuation. So personally, my experience with this is in some collaborations with Dan Preston, who's at Rice, who makes these, textile-based systems that, they use pneumatics and they can do heating and other mechanisms of haptic feedback. And because they are sort of fabricated from the ground up, you can realize form factors that are not possible when you're relying on off-the-shelf components, which is what we typically done, even when we're designing from scratch, right? Like we're machining components or we're buying components, and that constrains the design space in a way that I think these novel materials and actuation methods do not. I think there are still significant challenges to be overcome with sort of the new frontiers of actuation and materials in terms of the force magnitudes that are applied, the power maybe not power, but high voltage requirements or packaging of pneumatics. These remain engineering challenges to widespread deployment, but at least in sort of the sandbox of doing haptics research, they bring a lot of new tools to our disposal that allow us to, maybe investigate human perception in ways that we haven't been able to before.
Yeah, okay, that's really nice. And I think you sort of touch on in that answer some of the challenges that will be faced as well. So let me just then move on to the next question, which is over the next decade, what do you believe will be most needed in order to have significant developments in our field? So, do we need novel sensors, actuators, materials, manufacturing methods? Is it really the application? I mean, you mentioned how important the application consumer electronics was for helping the field advance. So what do you think we really need to see superpower this field in the decade ahead?
Um, of course, I want to say all, right? I want all new capabilities and new technologies. Um, I guess maybe what I see as most needed is less tangible. Um, I was reflecting on I wasn't at this workshop, but I heard about a workshop that took place at the recent ICRA conference in Atlanta, where there was a frank discussion about how do we really honestly and transparently report on the performance of our devices. So I think it was in the context of soft robotics, but if we really want to advance the field, right, we need to both tell our successes, but also communicate the limitations, right? So I've alluded to limitations in certain actuation technologies and certain materials, but I think sometimes it takes somebody who's really an expert in the field. If I think about like my students reading a paper, right? My students are going to read a paper and they're like, oh wow, this is this great thing, and it's solved. And I think maybe what we need to really um, challenge the field and push for advances is to not just push the publication of the latest new thing that we've developed, but also say, hey, we've advanced this far, but there are still these additional limitations that need to be overcome. And I think there's bigger picture challenges to how we're going to advance research, at least in the current landscape, that will be facing in the near term at least.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really thought-provoking answer. Yeah, your point about sort of honestly reporting on performance is a fascinating one.
Yeah, I mean, we're always trying to put, like, obviously we want to put our own contributions in the best light. You
Yeah,
know, that we bring demos to our conferences and we carefully craft those demos to show off the most redeeming qualities, and
of
maybe
course, yeah. It,
to mask the limitations, and perhaps some more honest conversations to make sure that this next generation of researchers can be both supportive of advances, but also think critically about, okay, that's a really great advancement, but it still has these limitations. So let's figure out how to attack those and push forward.
do you feel that that heavier use of benchmarking it could be a part of the solution? It's what you see in some fields like AI, where everybody sort of tries to show their performance against a benchmark. And I've noticed that the number of benchmarks tends to proliferate, but is that potentially part of a path forward?
I think that would be an important direction to take, right? We haven't really had, I mean, maybe we in certain spheres we have certain metrics that we, the Z width of our device, or
Mhm.
the torque output capabilities, but they're not benchmarked around sort of implementing some kind of end demonstration that
Yeah,
I think is more common in other fields that might
right.
be.
Yeah. Sort of the system level benchmarks maybe are missing. Huh, that might be an interesting thing to try to get some people together to think about. Well, thank you. That indeed very, very thought provoking. Well, let's move on. I wonder if you have any suggestions for how we can grow our community and increase its visibility.
So I have a few ideas. I think that one of the great benefits of our community is when we gather at our haptics conferences and we get together and we try our demos and share our latest advances. But this is it's a bit of a niche group,
Hmm.
um, and I think leveraging some of or engaging more in some of the larger venues, it's challenging, as sort of the RAS conferences grow, or other, materials research society meetings are enormous.
Right.
But I think it's that proximity to advances in related adjacent fields that really brings something to the community, and can help us grow, right? So, be it IEEE Robotics and Automation Society, the flagship conferences, the participation of the haptics community there, it's growing, but it could be more significant. And I think there's opportunities to bring what we know about human haptics and human tactile sensation to robotic tactile sensation. Similarly, in the HRI community,
Yeah.
there's not been as much presence of our fields of research, and so that would be an opportunity as well. So I think maybe we need some ambassadors, or we need ways of bringing our community together when we attend these larger meetings, so that we can attract new people.
Hmm. Interesting. So the idea would be to think about activities we can have associated with larger conferences, but nonetheless attract a good contingent of haptics people.
Yeah, and I think from a from a energy and sustainability standpoint, Robotics and Automation Society is thinking a lot about conference co-location.
Mhm.
And what are the conferences that we might, as we think about future Haptics Symposium and World Haptics conferences, could we set the timing and co-locate with conferences that are topically adjacent,
Mhm.
that would foster maybe us staying more for that other conference or those participants staying for ours as well.
Yeah.
This could be HRI, this could be even humanoids and the telepresence conferences. There's so many relevant research topics that cross both that could be or even outside of our societies. Like I know Materials Research Society has had several symposium activities in haptics. I think it can be an intimidating conference to break into just because of its scale, but perhaps more efforts in that area.
Nice. Okay. Thank you. Nice thoughts. I could see that being really powerful. So let me ask a closing question, which is what advice would you give to newcomers entering this field today?
I think what I've really taken away from the community is the interdisciplinary expertise. And so, it's always most comfortable to talk to people who approach research questions from your same perspective, but I think you gain more from people who approach research questions from different perspectives. So, this is really easy to achieve at our venues because many of the sessions are single track. So sitting in on papers, presentations that are a little different than your own, poster presentations that are maybe coming from, if you're an engineer, more the psychophysics perspective or vice versa. And then along with that, I think probing others' perspectives on, what do they see as the limitations in your own work or in their work so that you can have this sort of shared appreciation for, we can push our technology and our engineering in one direction, but if we're not addressing what others see as limitations, then we're gonna hit dead ends or be, coming up with solutions looking for problems.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Marcie, I think that concludes our interview. I'd like to thank you for your time and your insights. I'm going to go ahead now and stop the recording.
Okay.